You're listening to Big World Network.
Amazing Grace, Episode 7. Written by James Hellvig, read by Meagan Hedin. Father Bernard waits patiently in the ER reception area. Mac's sister sits dozing in a chair across from him. It has been 3 hours since he received the call and rushed to the hospital where Mac is undergoing surgery to remove multiple fragments of shrapnel from his chest and torso. Numerous police officials and newscasters hover in and around the crowded space, reminding the priest of a school of anxious fish. Their collective attention darts from door to door as newcomers come and go. A tired-looking surgeon in scrubs enters the waiting area and scowls as the crowd surges forward, impeding his path and barraging him with questions. Mac's sister jerks awake and the doctor's eyes lock onto hers as she struggles to rise. Waving her back to her seat, the physician gruffly dismisses the clamoring group and pushes his way directly toward her, arriving with the entourage in tow. "Mrs. Reynolds?" he asks. "It's Hontold, actually. How is my brother?" Smiling politely, the doctor shakes her hand, and, voice rising loud enough for the crowd to hear, he replies, "Stable. The surgery went well, and we set his broken wrist. Your brother has a concussion and some second-degree burns to contend with, but he should be able to go home in a day or two. I expect a full recovery." Visibly sagging with relief, Mac's sister hugs the physician, thanking him before she turns to Father Bernard to thank him as well. The assembled crowd splits its attention between the departing doctor and the relieved sibling. Sighing, Father Bernard gently takes her arm and steers the harangued woman through the questioning reporters, deftly redirecting questions. He angles towards the exit where a group of Captain Reynolds' detectives stand waiting. Leaning into the small group of men and women, Father Bernard inclines his head and asks, "Do you think you could help us shake up these vultures?" Grinning shark-like, a rumpled-looking detective steps out with his arms stretched wide and answers, "No problem, Padre. That's far enough, people." Exiting the building into the early morning air, Father Bernard walks quickly with Mac's sister in tow. He steers her across the street toward the parking lot, speaking in low tones. They're startled when a pair of tattooed young men suddenly block their path, pointing a silenced pistol at them. Moving instinctively, Father Bernard tries to sidestep and interpose himself between the assailants and Mrs. Hontold. The muzzle of the weapon shifts slightly and coughs a single time, sending the priest stumbling to the concrete, gasping in agony. Staring wide-eyed at the young men leveling the gun at her, Mac's sister asks, "What do you want?" Ignoring her, the man responds with a question of his own. "Do you have a cell phone?" Bewildered, she answers, "You want my cell phone?" Shaking his head, the pistol's point of aim lowering, the man grunts, "I want you to use it." The gun spits once more, and Mac's sister gasps as the bullet shatters her foot, sending her crashing to the pavement next to Father Bernard. They watch as the two men trot away, disappearing from view. Gritting his teeth, Father Bernard dials the emergency number while moving to reach the fallen woman. "Help us right across the street. The audacity of those punks." Reaching the moaning woman, he scoots as close as he can and wraps an arm around her. As he speaks into the phone, he hears the sound of running feet approaching. Suddenly, a new thought occurs to him. They didn't take anything. What in God's name was this about? Tammy pulls the battered rolling suitcase behind her as she slowly makes her way down the sidewalk. Using the reflected surfaces on the windows of parked cars and the plate glass of the storefronts, she watches for signs of surveillance. The day's newscast has been filled with reports of the attacks on Mac, his family, and Father Bernard. The church is the next logical target, and trap, of course. Satisfied that she isn't being followed, Tammy shuffles into the alley. Head down and muttering, she jerkily pulls the dingy case, pausing every so often to scratch or pant while carefully scrutinizing her surroundings. Reaching the fire escape of the second tallest building with a direct view of the church, she laboriously begins her ascent to the rooftop, mindful of the possibility of hostile watchers. Reaching the roof without incident, she plops down below the low baluster, pulling a crumpled bag from her pocket and bringing it to her mouth as if to drink. Inside the bag is a small directional microphone that she uses to scan the rooftop for other occupants. Slowly, lying on her side, Tammy pulls the luggage closer, taking a compact yet powerful multi-spectrum scope from a padded pocket. Using it to complete her survey of the roof, she rolls onto her back, hiding the device from view by tucking it under her arm. Closing her eyes and pulling the arm clutching the brown-sacked listening device across her face, she angles the microphone to carefully pan across the adjacent building. Hours pass and the snippets of conversation increase as people return home from their workdays and begin their evening rituals. Tammy has changed positions 3 times and has checked each of the buildings she suspects might contain a reaction team. Returning her attention to the tallest structure, her thoughts idle through possible scenarios. Did I screw up? I cleared this building pretty carefully. Maybe they're farther away than I thought. I was so sure it would be one of these structures. Her thoughts are interrupted by the cursing of a man in a Slavic language, followed by his comments in heavily accented English. Those idiots aren't even checking for surveillance. The police have 2 teams right there. A gruff voice, sounding tinny in her earpiece, scolds the other man. Shut up. If we see them, so will our target. It's unlikely the fools will draw her out. Smiling, Tammy focuses on the building next to hers. The 2 men are no longer speaking, but she knows the floor they're on. Hurrying to the stairwell entrance door, she carries the bag close to her chest, digging inside for the illegal lock gun. Quickly opening the door and entering the building, Tammy sheds her homeless persona except the long coat, donning armor and adding additional weapons to her carried arsenal. Charging down the stairs, she exits the building, discarding the empty case in the alley. As she works her way upstairs in the adjoining building, she pauses at the 27th floor to catch her breath, peering through the small window in the apartment hallway. 3 units street side. Let's hope I can keep the civilians out of this. Pulling the silenced Beretta pistol from her hip holster, Tammy shoves it into the deep, torn-out pocket on the right side of her coat, holding the microphone in her left hand. Breathing deeply, she pushes open the door and enters the hallway. Gas cans in hand and pockets stuffed with flares, the nervous trio darts across the street and crab walks quickly behind the church's large old garage. 2 of the men dump their cans, noses wrinkling as the noxious fumes quickly fill the space, while the third acts as a lookout. Dropping their empty containers and reaching for flares, the men freeze when their lookout hisses, "Cops!" Seconds later, the night erupts with flashing lights and the sound of running feet as dozens of officers swarm the men from 3 directions. Their weapons are drawn and they are screaming commands. "Police! Freeze! Hands in the air! Do it now!" Scrambling and frantically looking for a way out, the trio are quickly slammed to the pavement and cuffed. They and the arresting officers are unaware that they are being observed.
This has been a presentation of Big World Network. Visit us on BigWorldNetwork.com for more free weekly series, or follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks for listening.
You're listening to Big World Network.